Hey guys, Naeem back again, and today is chapter 15 of the blog series that I've been doing on my book, Praying for Peace, A Journey to Serenity. Um, so this is my memoir, and it's got 17 chapters, and the first 15 are my life story, which I've been outlining in these blogs, and then chapter 16 and 17 are kind of my evaluation of things and an explanation of what happened to me and what I learned in order to change my life. So I'm going to basically wrap up the series today. I'm going to go on and later on outline the things that changed. And that's kind of the goal of what all of this is about showing people where I was and what I went through, and then telling them what I did to change that and to change the course of my life, and hopefully help some people to apply those same principles to their own affairs, and share some of the blessings that I was fortunate enough to receive. So at the end of the last chapter, I had just lost my son in a drunken binge. I got into a fight with my ex-girlfriend. He was my surrogate son, and I went over drunk. I don't remember it to this day, and we got into a fight, and that was the last time I saw him. And when I realized what I'd done, I went on a binge, and like for weeks, and I had taken a butcher knife and ran it across the inside of my wrist. And when I woke up and realized that, I knew something had to change. Nothing had really changed inside of me, but I knew that I couldn't quit. I had to keep trying because I was going to kill myself. So at this point, I was on a 6-month leave of absence from work. That was basically forced on me by the forensic psychiatrist, and I was coming to the end of that period, and I had to go and have another evaluation with this psychiatrist. And if I didn't do well, if he didn't think I was fit for duty, I was going to lose my job as a firefighter. So somewhere in late May of 2006 is when I started to get it together again. I stopped drinking again, and I started going to AA meetings every day. I had been seeing my therapist, even though I was trying to finagle his understanding of my sobriety. I'd stay sober the days I had to go see him, but I had still been drinking a lot. But it was time now. Like, this was kind of like make or break. If I didn't get it together, I don't know what I was going to do. I went back. I was well groomed. The first time I went to go see him, I was a mess. And this time, I dressed like I don't know, like I was coaching a basketball game, semi-casual, I guess, and my hair was done. And I told him the truth about some things. I told him that I hadn't worked through my issues with my father, but that it wasn't going to happen overnight, and that I was trying to deal with it, and that I had lost my son, and that I was lost, and that I was doing everything that I could to get it together. I didn't tell him that I was only 2 weeks sober. I told him that I had some struggles, but I was honest with him about everything except for how much time I'd been sober. And at the end of the evaluation, he said I could return to work. So I was elated, because going in I was terrified. And I really put the work in a lot of ways. I went to meetings consistently. I didn't have a drink all summer. I was smoking a lot of weed, but and numbing myself, but I wasn't drinking, and that was huge for me. I was just trying to get it back together. I went back to work. I was also managing the local pool where I used to be a lifeguard. The summer was pretty decent. I was, rebuilding this broken relationship that I had with my girlfriend at the time, and things, they were going well. And then at the end of the summer, I wrote a letter to my son's mother, and I mailed it. And after a couple of weeks of not hearing back, I just decided to go over there. And when I went, there were no blinds on the windows. The apartment was vacant, and my heart just dropped. So I panicked. I called a number that I had for her mother in Pennsylvania, and she answered the phone when I called. And I tried to tell her that I had changed, and that I had gotten sober for Shaquan, and that I was a new person, and she told me she didn't care and that I was never going to see him again. And I broke. Went and got a pint of brandy, and I got drunk. And I also I took off my cross. I've worn a cross basically every day except for this period that I'm talking about now, since I was 16. Took off my cross, threw it out the window, and never saw it again. And my girlfriend was concerned, but I just asked her to back off for one day. I mean, I was devastated. I'd worked so hard all summer to get myself together, and it seemed like it was all for nothing. And I was mad at God, I didn't, I felt like, I knew I shouldn't have drank, but I was in so much pain. So, how could anybody blame me for drinking the way I drank when I had lived through so much, trauma and drama and hardship and fear and so I deal with things the only way I know how, and in a night that I'll never be able to recollect again, I lost somebody that meant the world to me. So I was mad at God. I didn't feel like it was fair. But I didn't continue to self-destruct. I got back on the wagon the next day, and I just kept plugging along, and my sister had just had her first child, and she had always had this, she had this silver Mitsubishi Eclipse. It was really cool, stick shift, and it was too small for her, with the car seat and everything, so I took out a loan. I bought that car. I needed a car anyway, and she got a bigger car, and the deal was going to be that, I would pay it off, and in a couple of years, when she, could maybe, handle having two cars or whatever, that I, when I was ready for my next car, that I would give it back to her. The next year was fairly uneventful. I mean, I went to work when I was supposed to. I coached basketball. I took my girlfriend to and from work. We had a dog. We used to take him to the dog park, smoke a little bit. We cooked meals together. I mean, things were getting better, But you don't just get sober. You don't just stop drinking. You don't just stop using drugs without doing any work. And so, as much as it seemed like I was getting it together, first of all, I was still numbing myself. I was smoking a lot of weed. I mean, I was smoking 6, 7, 8 blunts a day. And little by little, things were building, and I didn't realize it, and I was in a lot of pain over losing Shaquan, and it was at some point in this period that I went and got the tattoo that I have here on my arm of his face, and I'm sure he doesn't even look like that anymore, but it was all I could do to try and act out my pain and to try and work through, my grief. Things were hard. One thing that I had, I had already thrown the cross out, and when I did decide to start going back to church, I was Catholic at the time, and when you go for communion, usually you go back and then you have kind of a couple minutes of personal prayer, and every time I got to that place and I would kneel down to pray, I would pray for him, and I would pray that God would bring him back to me and pray that he would be safe, and I'd be overcome with emotion and I'd start crying, and every single time I went to church, I walked out crying. And so I stopped going to church for a while too, and I wasn't drinking, but I was more and more miserable, And then January of 2007, a friend of mine died of a drug overdose. I think he had to be like 25 or 26. A couple months later, a friend of mine walked into a bar, got into an argument, and this guy pulled out a gun, shot him right in the head. So that was two tragic deaths within 3 or 4 months, and on top of everything else that I was dealing with, and I broke, I started drinking here and there, largely in secret. I think the only one that really knew was my girlfriend. And then, I had been I had these unsettled issues from this relationship from 5 years earlier, where, there was this girl that I swore was my soulmate, and she had basically just kind of walked out on me with no explanation, and, years went by and this song came out that basically said, I just wonder if you ever think about me, and at the same time I've gotten my palm read, and the palm reader told me that there's this relationship from 5 years ago, and this girl was my soulmate, and I loved my girlfriend, but I was still in love with this girl from years ago, probably more so because of the fact that she just walked out on me with nothing, no explanation or anything. I think that was probably the hardest part for me to swallow. So I went on the internet and I put her name in, and came up with an address for her, and I wrote a letter, and I decided I was going to go bring it to her. And I mean, I was nervous. I was drinking on the way out there, and I vaguely remember the interaction. I gave her the letter. She called me a stalker and slammed the door in my face after telling me that it was an experiment and I needed to get over it. So I drank some more, and I don't really remember what happened after that. I woke up in a lot of pain in a trauma center in Hackensack Medical Center. I crashed the Eclipse. I totaled it, ran it into the divider on the highway, and put my teeth clean through my lips. Still the scar right there. And woke up again. Another one of those days where I was just in just complete disbelief at my behavior and just embarrassed, and that set off a summer of absolute hell for me. I tried to stay sober, but I think the most I got was like 11 days all summer. There were some things that were starting to line up. I finally found a therapist that spoke to me and that I felt could help me. But half the time I was drunk and I went to go see him, I mean, I was miserable. When I was sober, I was miserable, and when I was drunk, I was making everybody else miserable. And I mean, I don't think I was. No, you know what? I think they did know at work. I think I was coming in hungover still, but it wasn't to the extent that it had been before my leave of absence. But people were starting to notice, and I was drowning. I had tried. I was sober for a year, and smoking a little weed, but I was going to meetings, and I didn't know what else to do. I literally, I mean, I'd been to 4 rehabs in 2005. I'd spent a year sober. I was trying, and I was in just heart-wrenching turmoil, and I didn't know what to do. And finally, the break came that changed my life, and I went into the city to see a singer that I liked. Her name's Cheryl Pepsi Riley. She's done a lot of Tyler Perry plays, and had a couple of albums out, whatever. She was singing at this club in New York, and we had actually kind of developed a relationship from the first time I saw her. She had a John Coltrane shirt on, and I felt like that was a sign because I'm named after a John Coltrane song. And I had emailed her, and she emailed me back. I told her what I was going through, and she told me she was praying for me, and she was really supportive. And so that September, I was on another binge, and I went into the city because at this point, everybody in Montclair knows that I have a problem. I don't want to, it's really like embarrassing for me to even think about going into liquor stores, so I go to the city. So I went to the city. I went to go see her. She was standing at the door when I walked in, and she looked at me, and she could tell I was messed up. And I didn't stay long. I went to the bus terminal, Port Authority, and bought a bus ticket to go back home. I was really drunk. And I sat down to wait for the bus, and I woke up, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and all I had left was that bus ticket. And that terrified me. I had no ID, no debit cards, no money, no cell phone. Somebody, had robbed me blind. All I had left was that bus ticket, and the buses weren't even running anymore. I knew my old battalion chief had been, problematic in my life, and maybe a year prior to that, the chief switched me into a new group, and the new battalion chief had become like a huge godsend in my life. And there's more details about that in the book, but I knew his cell phone number by heart, and I went and asked the Port Authority cop if I could use his cell phone, and I called my boss. His name's Donnie, and 2 o'clock in the morning, he told me where to meet him. He drove into the city and picked me up, and he brought me home, and he gave me $100 in cash, and gave me some encouragement and told me that I was going to be okay. And that was it. I knew it could have been worse, man. I could have been kidnapped. I could have been murdered. I could have been raped. There's no telling what saved me that day except for grace. And that was the breaking point for me. That was the point at which I got a journal. I started to write in my journal daily, and things started to turn for me. It's also when I started writing the book. So that's that. That is my story, and I will now be sharing the lessons that I learned and the ways that I changed my life. Have a good day.